So it seems like everyone made it. So hello and welcome. This is going to be Shield Tanking 101. For people who have been playing for at least a few months now, this might be, at least at the beginning, might be a bit simple. This is geared towards the newer players who have been joining us after last week's trailer. So what we will do today is I'll talk you through how you shield tank your ships in EVE. Basically, I'm going to start, as I said, for the newest players. I'm going to give a short introduction to how you actually fit a tank to your ship, what kind of tanks you can have in sport, what exactly shield tanking, what you can do, what you shouldn't do. And then I'll go through the most important modules and items you'll need to correctly tank your ship. So, to start off, when looking at your fitting window in EVE, you can open that up with the shortcut Alt and F. You'll see that your ship has, on the top, it has the high slots. To the right, it has the mid slots. And in the bottom, there are the low slots. To the left, there are rigs. So, whenever you wanna tank your ship, you'll basically use either the mid slots or the low slots. This is important because depending on what you want to do else with it, this will have a factor. And further on fitting, there's a CPU, that is one of the attributes you need to fit something, and there's power grid. And then on the rigs, there's an amount of calibration you have at your disposal. Some rigs you want to fit on your ship will use more than others and have different utility and will have different impacts on the performance of your ship. So, about tanking, what can you tank and how is it done? There are the three most obvious ways of tanking a ship. There is the outermost way is the shield. This is the first hit point bar you have to shoot through if you want to kill an enemy. Then you'll have the armor tank, and then the hull. Starting off with the hull tank, this is, some people may say it's the best tank, some people may say it's the only way to tank, but in reality it's a rather inefficient way to tank. And it relies heavily on low slots, or only on low slots rigs. Then you have the armor tank. This relies on low slots as well, and rigs, of course. And it has some advantages and some disadvantages. For example, that the armor tank will slow you down because you will add mass to your ship. You will be less agile and not as fast as you were before. But you won't increase your signature radius. Because in EVE, when someone wants to kill you, it's basically the smaller you are and the faster you, the less it's easy to hit you and you'll take. So armor tank will make you slow, won't make you a bigger target. And that's the opposite of shield tanking. Shield tanking won't affect your speed at all, neither the agility, but it will affect your signature radius. So it will make you bigger. So this is why whenever you fit a ship, never fit both tanks, because you will be bigger and slower. Never mix tanks. The advantages you have with shields is different to armor and hull. They regenerate over time. And you have more room for errors, because once you lose all your shield hit points, there is still some armor and still some hull left. Whereas if you armor tank, there's only hull left, and of course if you hull tank, when you lose your hull tank, you lose your ship. And this brings me to a further point about the slots you use. When you shield tank, you will use the mid slots. This means you have all the low slots, or most of them, at your disposal for other modules. This means most of the times that you will be able to fit modules that increase your DPS on paper. So you just get more rate of fire, you get more damage, whereas armor will use those low slots, but will leave all the mid slots open, or most of them. So this means you'll have mid slots free to have crowd control or utility mid slots, which allow you to apply your damage better. So depending on what you want to do, it's interesting to decide whether or not shield tank or armor tank. In comparison to armor, when you tank, there are the active and passive resistance boosts. So shield resistance is most of the times, if it's passive, it's not effective as armor ones. That's a disadvantage we have to with, unfortunately, but that's why most of the times when you tank a shield fit, or when you shield tank, you will use active. So I've been talking a lot about tank, so what do you actually need to do when tanking is, you see, if you still have your fitting window open, you see that there's a tab defense. It will show you how much hit points you have in each category of shield, armor, and hull, and it will show you what distance you have. Now, those resistances are, well, not very good. This is why most of the time you will aim to get those resistances up and thus mitigate damage through those. We will use modules as well, which will increase our raw hit points. Like many things in EVE, when you want to increase or reduce some things, the resistances as well, it will be stacking penalized. This means the first item, let's say it reduces the EM vulnerability by 50%. This means that the first one will be full 50% reduction, but the next one and all the following will be penalized. So the next one will be about 89, and then even less years. And then at some point you'll be at, after 4, it won't be any worth at all to put even more. So it's important to use the modules you have at your disposal in a way that you don't stack too much, because you lose effectiveness and you'll waste the slot. And it's important to always keep that in mind, because it affects shield tanking. It affects almost everything in the game that has to do with modules where different modules affect same stats. So this is the class. So whenever you have questions, just put it in lecture.E-UNI. For example, now I've talked about the basic fitting and the basic tanking, if you have a question about that. So why does shield tanking increase your sig radius? When you look at the modules or the rigs used for shield tanking, all of them have the attribute that they will increase your sig radius by a certain amount. For example, it's not only the rigs, it's items as well, regular modules. For example, I'll link it right now. There you go. This is a medium shield extender. This will just increase your raw hit points. And if you have a look at the Attributes tab, the second to last line shows signature radius bonus, 7 meters. So this module, if you fit, it will increase your signature by 7 meters, which will make you, to a certain extent, more easy to hit. How significant is the difference between Tech 1 and Tech 2 in shields and in general? Jonathan, do you mean resistance mods or modules in general? Okay. In general, most of the times, there's a very few exceptions, but you'll find them, you'll learn about them. Tech 2 mods are the best you can get. Most of you, and you'll learn rather quickly about them that you have to pick the metaphor. For example, if you click the medium shield extender that I linked earlier, you can go to the Variations tab, which will show you all medium shield extenders. So you can then click on the very bottom, there's Compare. You click that and you get a nice compare window. You can play with this, and you can play with that with all the modules in the game, and you can compare them with, for example, the shield extender. You can look at shield hit point bonus, and is on par with some faction ones and the best you can get. While the meta 1, if you apply the meta level filter, see the meta 0 is the worst, and it slowly goes up. As I said before, in a very few exceptions, it's different. But in general, if you pick Tech 2, if you can use it, pick Tech 2. Does the increase in target radius matter if you're running gate to gate in something slow like a Badger? Well, a Badger is big as it is already. So most of the times the small addition of signature radius you have is not going to affect you that much. Okay, then let's talk about shield tanking and the skills you actually have to use, or that you want to use. There's the quite obvious shield tanking skills. For example, there's shield management. This will simply boost the raw hit points you have on your shield. Then there is shield compensation. This will allow you to, when using a local shield booster, this will allow you to use less capacitor. There's shield operation. This will reduce the shield recharge time. On that I will talk a bit later. There's shield upgrades. This makes you use less power grid for your shield mods. Then there is tactical shield manipulation. This will prevent, to a certain extent, the bleed through you have. So when you get very low shields, the damage you take will slowly bleed into your armor, even though you still have some shield HP left. Training up tactical shield manipulation will prevent that to a certain extent. And also, very important, tactical shield manipulation will allow you to use very good shield tanking modules, like the invulnerability fields and the resistance deflection fields. And then there are the 4 skills that will help you use for the passive resistance boosts. So there's thermic shield compensation, as well as EM shield compensation, explosive and kinetic shield compensation. I mentioned shield recharge. This is a big advantage of flying shield tanks, that over time will just slowly recharge all your shields back. The thing is, though, that it won't just recharge at a flat rate. It's not just a certain amount of shield HP per second or per minute. It's like when you run around using your capacitor, it will peak like shields. The best recharge of shields and capacitor is at about 25%. Is at 25%. If you go lower, it crashes really hard. So if you're between 1 and 10%, it's terrible. Then it slowly gets better up to 25%. That's where you will have your best recharge. And then it slows down again up to 98%, where it becomes terrible again. Do you have any questions concerning the skills or the recharge rate? Is the recharge rate a variable you actually tweak to get the most out of your ship in fights? Well, it depends what kind of a fight. There is a certain tanking style, I'll talk about it later, is that you only use your recharge rate, but it is not viable in fleet fights, in PvP. This is mostly used in PvE, so when you fight against NPCs. But I'll explain that just in a minute, that in fights you'll use different styles of tanks. So, Todd wants to know, at the moment my main risk factors are suicide ganking, where recharge rates aren't important. Surviving long enough for Concord to arrive is, how does that change fitting strategy? So, this is exactly one kind of tanking style. It's basically you put as much tank on as possible to survive the longest. So you will put on a decent resist profile and put in as many raw hit points as possible. In general, I strongly encourage every one of you to use fitting programs like PIFA or EFT. You can play around with your fits. You can take a look at HP, so effective hit points, and you'll see that you can combine different kinds of resistance boosts. You can combine it with raw hit point additions and look and find out what will be the best for your situation. Jonathan wants to know raw hit points being shield extenders. Yeah. Raw hit points is the number you see in your fitting window. That's just the raw amount of hit points you have. I often say raw because when you say HP or EHP for effect points is when you already take the resistances you have into account and calculate from there how much damage you could actually tank. So raw hit points is the number you have on the modules when it says shield. Let me check. When it says shield hit point bonus, it says 1000 HP. That's the raw hit point bonus you get out of a medium shield extender. Raw is kind of a passive hit points where you don't have to activate the modules to amp your tank. Yeah, you could say that. It's no, not exactly. The raw hit points is only the amount of hit points you have, but without any modules on, you'll already have every ship right out of the bat has already some resistances, and you can increase that with passive modules. You can increase that with your rigs. So it's not the inactive, it's not the passive hit points now. Okay, then let's talk about tanking styles. I already mentioned about pure buffer and the recharge rate that Gerazim mentioned. So if you like to, or for some ships, it makes sense to tweak your ship in a certain way with certain modules that your recharge rate is very high. And this way you'll be able to tank incoming damage while it being actually passive. It just happens. The recharge rate just happens. But this only really works in a scenario where you know exactly what kind of damage will come in. So if it's only explosive or only EM. And you have to know more or less exactly how much there will be incoming. This is why passive tanking or the recharge rate tanking doesn't work well for fleets, because most of the time there will be enough people to break that tank easily. Simply, you don't know what might happen. There's a new player on field, there's a third party, and then your tank won't hold anymore. This brings me to the most common tanking style for fleets. It's basically a buffer tank. You have a decent resist profile where you'll use your mid slots in a way that more or less same resistances across the board and enough hit points. This is for when you then get to have logistics on field that will heal you. This will make it easier for them to heal you when you have better resists. This means the damage that comes in will be reduced to such an extent that the logistics can heal you up quicker than the damage comes in, or it's at least the goal we have. And then having enough raw hit points means that while the logistics is locking you up and starting to rep you, you can take the damage. The best resist profile won't help you if you die instantly or if you lose your ship or your whole shield HP instantly. That's why in fleets you need to have a good balance between hit points and resistances. So the logistics save you and continuously repair you. And then there's a more for smaller gangs or against NPCs as well. It's active shield tank. You have a good resist profile. You use different modules to up your resistances. And then you use a shield booster on your own ship to repair your own shield HP. This works very well in smaller gangs or in solo PvP or against NPCs. Now I've been talking about all these things, and you're probably asking yourself, what kind of modules do we use? What is there to fit on your ship that will help me? So I linked it earlier already. Most of the times you'll put on medium shield extenders on your frigates, or a meta version depending on how much fitting room you have. This will give you enough buffer. Or you'll use large ones for your cruisers, battleships. To up your resistances, you'll be using most of the times, you'll be using adaptive invulnerability fields. Adaptive invulnerability fields are awesome because they give you a very good boost in resistances across the board on all 4 damage types. But they are active, so if you can't use them, you won't get any benefits. Then there are the amplifiers. Those are passive modules that will give you a boost to resist only on one type. And the hardeners. Those will give you a boost to a single damage type as well, but they are active and thus more effective. They will give you a bigger boost. And then there's the damage control. The damage control is the all-around tool. It gives you a bonus to all the resistances. And to come back to almost the beginning, it's the only module that will help you, or that will give you a resistance boost to your hull. This being the only one, and only giving you 60% explains why hull tanking isn't as good as armor or shield tanking. Because you have only this one item and the boost isn't that good, and local hull reps on your own ship or remote hull repairs aren't effective or efficient as shield or armor repairs. Those are the modules you'll fit on in your mid and low slots. And then there are the rigs. So shield rigs come in a lot of variations. There's shield rigs for most of the things. There are shield rigs for your resistances. There are shield rigs for raw hit points. There are shield rigs for your recharge rate. There's all kinds of rigs. For example, here's the rig for your EM resistance. Very important to know about rigs. Different from the modules, when you look at requirements, rigs don't need any requirements. It may say that you still have to train a few days, but you can fit it and use it. This has been changed just recently, so it still says you total train time is a few days to actually fit something, but that's not true anymore. You can use and fit all the rigs, but in some cases you still might want to consider to training up the corresponding skill, because some of the rigs have drawbacks. For example, looking at the medium anti-EM screen reinforcer 2, the drawback is increased signature radius. So the higher your skill is, the less your signature radius will be increased. And as I said in the beginning, you want to be as fast and as small as possible to mitigate as much damage as possible. Especially for the new players or the newer players, I recommend looking at the market window. Go to ship equipment, shields, and just take a look through all the categories and of shield modules there are. Look at what's out there. Find what you might want to use. Generally explore what there is, because there's a lot of things. Of course, all the shield modules are in the shield subcategory, but there are very few that affect shields as well in the engineering equipment as well. For example, in engineering equipment, power diagnostic systems will give you a small shield hit point bonus as well, even though it's not in the shield subcategory. Same with rigs. It's rigs you will find under the ship modifications category, and there's a lot of different rigs. Take a look through it, find out what there is, what you might want to use. And these are and have been the topics I want to discuss. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them at lecture.eu. This lecture is more or less over, but we still have 12 minutes, so if you have any questions, ask me. I'll link a few links to the wiki. If you have any more interest, always there's so much information on the internet, and of course, especially on the E-UNI wiki. Take your time, search for the topics, the tanking styles, whatever it is, it's probably on the wiki. Erasmus wants to know more on active versus passive. Seems I forgot to link the active one. So, passive is where you will tweak your ship and use different modules, increase your recharge rate as much as possible. Prime example is the Drake. There it is, the Drake. The Drake is a prime example for passive tanking. Most of the fits for ratting that you'll find, or all the good ones at least, are passive tanked. So they'll be rigged and fitted in a way that the recharge rate is high enough to out repair the incoming DPS. Whereas other ships, a very good example is the Vagabond, will use, of course, resistances, but they will use active boosters. Instead of waiting for the ship to slowly recharge the shields, they'll use items like large shield boosters. Those use capacitor and will recharge your shield a lot quicker than the passive offers. Then there's the special one, if you want. It's the ancillary shield booster. This one is special because it works with charges. You can put in your cap recharges, your cap booster charges, and it will rep a lot more and a lot less cap intensive. At some point, it will run out of charges. So these are the two kinds of active tanks you will use. It's either a regular shield booster that will be decent, but you'll be able to use it all the time. And there is the ancillary shield booster that you can also use all the time, but once you run out of charges and you continue to using it, it will be very, very inefficient. But to recharge the cap boosters into the ancillary shield booster, it takes a long time. It's a minute. So depending on what you do, a minute you don't have. Ancillary shield boosters are very good for what's called burst tank. It will give you a lot very quick, but at some point you will run out of charges. Arcadia wants to know, can you go over shield boosters using combat? When should we activate, deactivate? Any tips on using them efficiently to not waste cap and maximize shield rep? Well, it's Eve, so the obvious answer is it depends. It depends on the incoming damage. If you know your enemy, if you know how much damage he can put out, you can wait to take enough damage that the amount of shield you will repair won't be lost. So if you take 300 damage, your shield booster repairs 400 damage, you would lose 100, and you don't want to do that because it's basically capacity you lost. Time it in a way that you don't lose out on it. But of course it's PvP, so you never know exactly, and you never know what's going to happen next. So it really depends, and the only real advice I can give is you have to try it out, you have to test it and get a lot of experience. This is something in solo or very small gang PvP rep. It's something you want to master, but it's going to take a long time. It's basically finding out if you want to be very efficient with your capacitor, so taking larger blows to your shield and be closer to death, or if you want to be sure and use more capacitor. But in the long run, this might lead to your death as well because you run out of cap. Erasmus wants to know, what situations or enemies would it be better to be passive or active? Passive tanking in fleets is, I wouldn't advise it. Just because passive tanking is really something you tailor it. You know that you'll do a certain missions, certain scenarios against NPCs, and you know what kind of enemies, how many, what damage type. You know exactly what's going to happen, exactly to those needs. Whereas in PvP, you don't know what's going to happen. So for PvP fleets, either use, for very small gangs, you can either use the reps with shield boosters or ancillary shield boosters, or go buffer with logistic support that will use the boosters. I can link them as well. Gerasim, but how high a priority are logistics as targets in fleet fights, and what's their means of survivability? Logistics have the most logistics ship or the viable ones, the ones that get used regularly, have bonuses to range. Even though it says on the large remote shield booster, it says that the range is only kilometers. All of the logistics ships have a bonus to this range. This results in logistics being able to be far away from the enemy while still being in repair of its fleet mates. This, and of course positioning. In fleet fights, positioning is crucial. If you miss position, if you allow your enemy to get too close to your logistics without you being close as well, it's gonna get messy. And priority, logistics are of course always a priority, but that ends as well. If you have a huge fleet with few logistics, both sides, you know that neither of the logistics can out the incoming DPS. So in this scenario, the logistics don't play a role. What you do is just kill off DPS as quick as possible and hope that you do it quicker than the enemy. Whereas if you have smaller groups where logistics can out-repair enemy DPS, it becomes an interesting and reasonable action to go and kill the enemy logistics. Yes, Old Samurai, that's correct. You use buffer with or without logistics for PvP. You use passive almost only for PvE. You use active for small gang or solo PvP or for PvE. There are very few instances of missions you can do with the buffer tank. These exist. If you know exactly what you need to do, you can just go in, complete the objective, and get out. So depending on the mission, you don't even need to be actively or passively repairing your shield. This requires a certain amount of experience within this scenario of missions. So the next class is about to start. So if you have any last questions, please ask them now. And if you don't, then looks like we're done here. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you for your interesting questions. And I hope you can apply this new knowledge. And as always, if you have any questions, shoot me a mail. Of course, explore the wiki. There's almost nothing that isn't on E-UNI's wiki. Just look for it or ask on the forums. There's always people who help and answer those questions for you.